It's the late 13th century. A new king is crowned in France. He's only a teenager, but everyone remarks on his calm, stoic nature. And he might just be the most beautiful man in all of Europe. They call him Philip the Bel, the handsome, the fair. But beauty is only skin deep. Behind his angelic features lies a cold, ruthless ambition and a willingness to destroy anyone who stands in his way. No one in France or Europe is ready for what comes next. Philip's unstoppable quest for glory sets him against the Plantagenets, throwing decades of peace out the window. His self-righteousness leads him to take on the Pope himself and destroy one of the world's most famous religious orders for good. His obsession with legacy will threaten to dismantle his entire dynasty and kick off one of the longest wars in all of history. Step inside the brutal reign of one of the Middle Ages' most cold-blooded rulers. This is a story of what happens when a king truly believes he's God's chosen one. Unlike Philip, it ain't pretty.
That's right, This Is History is taking a trip over the channel with friend of the show Danielle Cybulski to tell the story of Philip the Fair, aka the Iron King. And first things first, Danielle, can I just say I'm extremely envious that you get to tell this story because it is a cracker.
It really is. It really is. And I'm so happy to be able to share this with your listeners because I know they're really used to these crazy stories about Plantagenets, and Philip will really give the Plantagenets a run for their money.
So, quick one on nicknames. He's called Philip le Bel, Philip the Fair. I mean, is that, what is he, just not cheat at Monopoly or something? What's the name all about?
I think it's confusing now because he's called Philip the Fair, and he's definitely not fair. And we will keep finding out that he's not fair. But this really has to do with his looks. I do say his name is Philippe le Bel. He's called Philip the Handsome. And I think he's translated as Philip the Fair over time because he's not only very handsome, but he's also fair in that he has, light skin, he has blonde hair. But if you look at the statuary, he's always looking very fashionable. He's got like this page boy hair. It's kind of curled at his chin. It looks pretty good. He's got very symmetrical features. And he has the type of beauty that people valued in the Middle Ages, where he doesn't have like a rock hard body. He has what we might call a dad bod, which everyone thought was just beautiful. And I mean, it is. When you look at statuary of Philip, he always looks very symmetrical, very beautiful, very put together. And he's always clean shaven, which I think is very interesting.
So we've got a hot centrist dad, but the series is called The Iron King. So just explain that one for us.
Right. So he's not really called the Iron King until the 1950s. And that is based on a novel by Maurice Druon, which was really, really popular. And I honestly think this is a pun because he's been called Philip the Fair for centuries. And in French, the word fair means iron. So I think this is a bit of a pun on Maurice Druon's part, but it also makes a lot of sense because Philip is expressionless, famously expressionless. He doesn't really give you a lot of emotion. He's called a statue. He's called, an owl. Doesn't give you a lot of emotion. So it really works well. And I guess the man in the iron mask was already taken. So we have the Iron King.
And it's funny, isn't it? Because typically British and French history, although in this period there's almost constant warfare, or at least people go na across the channel at one another between the English and the French. It's almost like these two stories aren't told together. And you either learn, the English history or French history, but they don't really connect so much. So I think it's great that you're going to give us the French side to a story that we're telling from the English perspective in the series that I'm doing.
Yeah, I mean, you always have to draw the line somewhere. As you said, in each episode, you can only tell so many things. But these two houses, the Plantagenets, the Capetians, they are so interlinked. And the decisions that they make often are not just political, but they're personal as well. They have a lot to do with the fact that these are family members or friends or distant family members. And the decisions that they make are personal. So bringing these two things together, I think is just super fun and brilliant. And I think that the listeners are going to love hearing more about Philip.
You've been writing these episodes. Have you found yourself warming to Philip the Fair? Is he a guy that you can warm to at all? I mean, he has this reputation of being extremely handsome, the fair, le belle, but not necessarily of being the sort of guy you would want to go out for a pint with.
No, I don't want to go out for a pint with him. Absolutely not. But as a character or as somebody that you're seeing from a distance, like everything that he does is jaw-dropping. Like, how is he making these decisions? How is he bringing these people into his life? Like, he is a guy that bullies two different popes. Like, this is unbelievable. He has just this boldness that is hidden behind this mask that he's wearing all the time. So he looks like he's unruffled, but he also has this deep sense of like rage and insult or ideas about the glory of France that come forward. So I don't know that I've warmed to him as a person, would never want to be related to him, married to him, none of these things. But as a character, he's just so interesting. It's hard not to just want to learn more about him.
We've heard in the course of the 4 seasons of the show we've done so far from the Plantagenet perspective of Louis VII, Philip Augustus. We had a little taste of Louis VIII, Louis the Lion, and Louis IX, of course, the big guy, the sainted Louis IX, the crusader, the collector of great relics. I mean, where do you think that Philip IV, and I know this is maybe a question we'll ask at the end of your season as well, but where do you think he stands in the great run of the Capetians?
I think he's really up there. I think that you have to put St. Louis right up there and you have to put Philip Augustus there. But I would say that Philip IV is a close third to these guys because the changes that he makes are absolutely amazing and fundamental. So he changes the shape of church history. He changes the shape of French history. And he took on the Templars, which is really crazy when you think about it, because this is a massive military order and maybe they're not the people that you want to take on. So the changes that he makes and this idea that he's building of a French sort of identity make him somebody who should be really up there with those big names like St. Louis, like Philip Augustus.
Do you think that's the family goal of the Capetians? I mean, I remember this great story. I think we told it in the first season of this podcast, where you have a teenage Philip Augustus, Philip II, sort of sitting, chewing on a hazel twig under a tree while his advisors argue among themselves when he's, a very, very young king. And someone says, "Oi, Philip, what are you thinking about?" He says, "Well, I'm just wondering if I should make France into the greatest country in the world again since the day, restore it to the glory of Charlemagne." I love that image, whether the story is literally true or not, we can debate. But is this the goal of the Capetians in this age, to restore France to its glory under Charlemagne?
Yeah, 100%. And I love that moment in your series where you have Philip Augustus sitting under a tree, because this is the type of thing that I think Philip the Fair would absolutely do. Probably not sitting under a tree because that would be just beneath his dignity, but he would be sitting in a royal room and you'd be thinking about how to bring things together. And as the series goes on, you'll see the steps that he takes to try and bring these counties together, because France at this time has Philip as an overlord, but it's mostly ruled by small noble families. And this has been a problem in France forever. And you have kings like Philip Augustus that are trying to bring this together so that it's whole again, so that it has one ruler. And this is something that Philip IV is definitely working towards. It's something that is in the back of his mind always. And it really influences the decisions that he makes, especially some of the big figures that he starts to take on and butt heads with as time goes on.
Now, you and I have known each other for a while, and you've been a guest on one of the subscriber episodes of This Is History Plus before, but I thought it would be good to throw you some quick-fire questions so that the listeners can really get to know you a little bit. Is that okay?
Yeah, of course. Bring it on.
Well, be careful what you wish for.
I know we've known each other too long.
No, it's going to be fine. It's going to be listener friendly. What's your favourite moment in history? It could be anything.
Well, I was thinking about this question, and I did say it out loud in my house. And my oldest daughter said, it has to be the day that she was born. So there's that. The day that each of my children were born. Of course, those are my favorite moments in history. But I don't really have a favorite moment as in like a battle or a wedding or something like that turns history. But my favorite century for sure is the 14th century. There's so much that happens in that century. It's just so dramatic. And imagining being a person that lives through all of these things, it's just a fascinating century. So like, this is not one moment in history, it's a whole 100 years, but I absolutely love the 14th century.
I think in the grand scheme of the history of the Earth, 1 century is but the blink of an eye.
Right.
What does that suggest about you, Danielle? Are you drawn to a century of famine and endemic war and the worst pandemic in human history and the sort of turning wheel of fortune? Is this an indication of the tone of the miniseries we have ahead of us?
I have asked that question of myself before. Like, is this just like a perverse draw to disaster? And, it really isn't. Thinking about this, my favorite part of this is the way that people deal with it. So I'm really interested in that human story, the psychology behind people. So you're being faced with the 100 Years' War. You're being faced with just huge shifts in the church over this time. And like you say, the Black Death. And like, how are people dealing with it? How are they getting past it? And I think those are the stories that really interest me more than the death and disaster. I'm not a big fan of death and disaster, but the stories that come out of it are really beautiful and I think really speak to the best of the human spirit. So I know that is a really Pollyanna answer, but thinking about it, that is what I love about that century.
No, I think we've got quite enough death and disaster these days. It's nice to have a bit of optimism on the podcast.
Right.
What's your favourite historical fact about Philip the Fair?
Philip is just fascinating. And I think one of the best things about him is the way he comes to the throne, which people are going to find in episode 1. So he's 17 years old. And I remember, so in one of your bonus episodes, you were talking about Henry III. And the producer, Georgia, asked you what it would have been like for you to be king at 9 years old. That was one of my favorite moments in your bonus episodes.
You don't want to see that.
Right. But like, if you come to the throne at 17, who are you going to be? And he's already a knight. He's already married. He's already the king of Navarre. So that's really interesting. And then I think like if there's one fact that I think is interesting about Philip is that he loves hunting. So this is a guy who doesn't allow himself much fun at all, doesn't allow most people much fun at all, but he loves hunting. And at the same time, in his wills, he leaves money to the peasants whose fields he's trodden while he's hunting. So even while he's hunting, he's feeling bad about it, but he won't stop. And I think this tells you a lot about Philip right at the onset.
Has Philip ever been depicted on screen? I can think of one example of Philip being depicted on screen, and that's in the drama Nightfall, where he was depicted by Ed Stoppard. Ed Stoppard the Fair. I mean, a good-looking man, to be fair to the guy. Any other cinematic depictions of Philip the Fair that you can think of?
Not that I can think of. And really, when I was starting to look into him more in depth, it's Nightfall that people bring it back to. And some really beautiful lines from him in Nightfall, which unfortunately weren't based on quotes that we have from Philip. But he's just kind of under the radar. And it's so interesting because there are so many times when people say this happened, something happened with the Templars or the church. Oh, it was Philip. And then you hear nothing more about it. And it's fascinating that in English especially, we don't have more information about Philip because he's so influential. It's kind of surprising. Maybe he should be on screen. Maybe he will be after this series.
Well, there you go. Maybe the cinematic rights are out there for producers who think that this might be the next big hit from the This Is History cinematic universe. What's the most surprising thing about you?
I think that most people who know me think of me as having a pretty chill and peaceful vibe, especially if they have read my book, How to Live Like a Monk. But what surprises people, I think, is that I'm a martial artist. So in my spare time, like 4 or 5 times a week, I'm practicing a particularly brutal form of martial arts. When I'm not meditating, that's what I'm doing. So I think that surprises people. They don't really expect that from, mild-mannered historians, perhaps.
Hold on, what form of martial arts?
I do Krav Maga.
That's so for listeners who want a clue, think about Jason Bourne, I think. A lot of Jason Bourne fighting. So you could see that microphone in front of you.
Yeah.
You could kill me with it. Or the headphones, or indeed any of the books in the background. That's am I doing Krav Maga a disservice here?
Not really. We don't usually practice killing people, mostly defending from people who kill us. And that's for legal reasons. But could I kill you with a microphone? At this distance across the Atlantic, probably not. So you're safe today.
There are flights across the Atlantic every day.
Bring it on, Jones.
I'm not going to bring it anywhere, except to... hold on. I'm going to bring it to one more question. If you weren't a historian, what would you be?
When I was younger, and this probably relates to the martial arts thing, I wanted to be an actress. I thought it'd be really cool to be like the evil Bond girl. But I think that ship has probably sailed at middle age. But I probably have a more boring answer. I'd probably be teaching something. So I do actually coach and teach self-defense and things like that. I am a historian because I love sharing information with people. And so I think I would probably end up teaching something somewhere at some point.
Lovely. Well, I feel suitably prepped. Now, can you give us a cheeky preview of what we can expect over the course of your next 6 episodes of this brilliant spin-off series?
What can you not expect? So we have fights with 2 popes. We have a guy that is king of 2 kingdoms. We have sex scandals. We have poison scandals. We have Philip riding into battle. We have sieges. We have naval warfare. We have a little bit of everything. So listeners are going to enjoy the heck out of Philip, I think, because he is somebody who can definitely stand up next to the Plantagenets and really be entertaining for a few podcast episodes.
Going toe-to-toe with the Plantagenets. Well, obviously, I'll be joining you for the special subscriber episodes to dive into more detail. And I'll get to chat to you in those for an additional 30 minutes each week, dissecting what you've covered in your main episodes in more juicy detail.
Looking forward to it.
Well, this is all very exciting. More battles, more blood, more blasphemy, and now and again, more Plantagenets as well. It's going to be fascinating to see it all from a different angle. Danielle, thank you and good luck.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.